the best thing that we can do is start taking control of our own joy, paying attention when you feel it, paying attention to what you love. You have to work for fulfillment. You have to work for purpose. You have to work for joy. And the more you put into something, I believe it's an eternal principle. The more you put into something, the more you get out of it.
Hi, it's your friend Lizzy, and welcome to Lean In with Lizzy. Today we get to learn from author, Instagrammer, and teen parenting expert, Brooke Romney. Brooke has become known for her widely popular Instagram, Brooke Romney Writes. Her books, Modern Manners for Kids and Modern Manners for Teens, and my favorite book, I Like Me Anyway. Brooke is one of the most real women I know. She isn't afraid to be wrong, to try again, and you can always count on her to always say it just as it is. Her insights on parenting and womanhood have been what I've needed over and over and have made me laugh and find hope in this journey we're all on. So pull up a chair as I invite you to join me in this fun and deeply profound conversation with my friend, Brooke Romney. Brooke, I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for coming and being on the show today.
Well, I love any chat I get with you, so I'm so excited too.
Thank you. Okay, so just tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, what makes you you?
Big question, but mom of 4 boys. I also have a daughter-in-law, 2 grandbabies, and so that is really the central part of my life. We've moved all around the country, my husband and I have. We've had all kinds of really high, exciting experiences and some really low points, and I really love where we've settled. Not that life is perfect, but just that we have come so far and understand a little bit better who we are. I'm on Instagram a lot at Brooke Romney Writes. I love sharing real life with a hopeful twist and helping parents navigate parenting kids, especially teenagers, but also helping women understand who they are and kind of get rid of that idea that we have to be perfect in order to enjoy our life.
So good. That real life with a hopeful twist is, I think, why people feel so endeared to you right away, because you don't feel like you have to perform for you or be something. It's like, but it is hopeful. It's not like, oh, because this is so hard, like life sucks. It's like, no, this, and look how beautiful it is because of that mess in the middle and all the stuff we do. And so, I mean, I think on behalf of everyone listening, thank you for giving that perspective on motherhood and womanhood and parenthood, because it's so needed. It's so needed.
You. That is hopefully what people leave my page or my books thinking, that we're in it together and there's some good and some really hard things, but there's also so much joy inside of both of those.
Yep, you do it. You totally do that. So currently you write a lot about being a teen parent.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to that? That's not always what you've written about, but it's what you've written about for the last little while, a couple years at least.
Yeah, probably about 5 years.
Oh, 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us why that niche for now.
I was writing about just general observations, life observations, things like that. And then my kids started getting older and my oldest became a teen, and the Instagram community had really started with young parents, and it was so fun. And I just remember feeling like, oh, I feel like I'm a part of something. Even if you're stuck at home, you feel like there's a community. And then as my kids started getting older, I was looking for something similar with teenagers, and it didn't exist. And I felt so lost in my new stage, and I felt so alone. And every time something would happen, I would be like, is this normal? And when you have like a 3-year-old and they're throwing fits when you leave the park and you read on a blog or on Instagram, you're like, oh, this is normal. But there was nothing that was saying that about teenagers. And the other thing that's really difficult is not only was the internet silent, but the people in your circle are silent, because now all of a sudden you have to protect their own circumstances, and it's their story. And it's really embarrassing if somebody finds out what your 14-year-old was doing or struggling with. And so I just felt really alone. And so I decided to create the community that I didn't have and share some of the really important lessons that I had learned. And if I could help one parent do it a little better, or feel a little less alone, or make it a little easier, or get in front of a problem that might happen, then that was worth the work to me.
I love that, both that's what led you to do what you do, but like as a broader tip, as women think about what they can do in the world and the impact they can make, often so many times when I've talked to women, it's where they didn't find the answers themselves.
Yes.
And they had to create them. And it was like in the loneliness or the hard or just a product. They were starting a business, like the product didn't exist that I knew I needed.
Yeah.
And I knew a lot of women needed. And so to not get stuck if you feel like you're in a place where it's like, nobody's doing this, so woe is me. Instead of like, no one's doing this. So like, opportunity is mine. I can do this.
I love that because that's also exactly how I wrote Modern Manners for Teens is we're in the teen stage and I am desperately searching on Amazon. Social norms for teens, book about how teens should act, book about helping teens understand manners, book about, and there was nothing that was coming up. And for a while I did what you said, where I was like, oh, this is such a bummer. How am I going to find this? How can I teach this myself? And then I was like, oh, maybe it's because I'm supposed to create that.
So good. And we'll make sure we link those. You know how obsessed I am. I've given them away as Christmas gifts, parent gifts at our school. Like I'm a big believer in those because it makes it easy. They're like little calendars where you can just like break down one habit, one idea, one scenario for your teen and for kids to say, let's teach this in a bite-sized way. It's really hard when a kid just hears like, be good, be nice. But there's some things that just aren't even appropriate for little kids. We shouldn't even expect them to do.
Right.
But when you read through those, it's like, oh yeah, my kid can do this or my teenager can do that.
Yeah.
And also, selfishly, can I admit this for any of my neighbors listening? I was like, if I hand this out to all my neighbors in my school, I hope that's the kind of kids that my kids are hanging around.
Yeah.
So I hope they're teaching it too. So I'll just give it to all the people I know that have kids my kids' ages. And
well, there's so much power in a community response to something, right? Like when a whole classroom is doing it, the whole classroom is elevated rather than one kid being the weirdo because they pitch in, right? And it really does. So you've been such a huge supporter and I'm so appreciative.
I love it. Tell me what you do for the classroom too. That's a new product training. I haven't.
Yeah, we just have some videos that go along with the manners. So teaching through video, and then they have discussion prompts, writing prompts, classroom activities. So that's also really fun.
So cool. I just saw you launch that and I'm really excited to see more about what that is. Okay. So dove into teens. It's been 5 years. If you weren't writing about teens, your Instagram handle is Brooke Romney Writes. It's not just Brooke Romney, the teen expert.
Right.
What are other topics that fire you up?
Really just helping women find purpose, peace, and joy when life isn't ideal. I think many of us have this expectation that life is supposed to just be smooth and easy and all well, And I think helping women understand that you can have mess, you can have hardship, you can have ridiculously serious disappointment, you can have kids who break your heart, and you can still live a life that you love and that you're proud of.
I think when I really connected with you at the beginning, I can't remember exactly where, I think at a conference probably, your book had just come out, I Like Me Anyway. And I like reading that book, I felt so seen. I just felt like I'm not the only one who feels this way, who just all the things you said, like that I don't measure up in some ways, that there are things that I'm really not very good at. And it's like really hard because there's a lot of them, but also someone feels so visual. And I'm seeing so many women good at so many things. And there was just chapter after chapter that I just felt like, yeah, me too. Me too. Thank you for seeing me. And love to link that book as well, because I feel like you don't talk about that as much on your page right now, but I feel like your voice there is still so needed. So maybe that's my Christmas gift this year is like so all my friends need that too. Because it is easy to feel alone if you're the only one who's not buying into the more is more is more, and everyone has to be perfect, and our homes and our bodies and the way we look and the way we do every single thing in our home. It feels like everyone's bought into that. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt it much more strongly a little earlier in my motherhood journey. Like you said, many of the things that I was good at could not be displayed. I was really bad at being organized and keeping things clean and throwing beautiful parties and anything that felt kind of Instagram worthy. And it started to get really discouraging. Not only that, but, I know you have girls who have plenty of less than perfect moments, but having 3 boys in 3.5 years really was a lot for me. And they didn't act the way I wanted them to act, and they didn't do what I wanted them to do, and they didn't wear what I wanted them to wear. And I had to reevaluate what being a great mom looked like, what it felt like, and the qualifications that I had for myself. And it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of internal work, and it continues to be. And I think that book was kind of my love letter to myself. All those things that took me so long to learn, and the things that I wish I would have known and been okay with from the beginning. Because once I embraced who I am and who I was, with still so much opportunity to grow and change and become better. But once I was willing to embrace that, I gave other people the permission to embrace me as I was too. And my relationships were more genuine, and they were more real. And I stopped worrying so much about showing up as somebody that I wasn't, and just being really comfortable at showing up as who I was.
Oh, so good. What hit me in that, I think a lot about why I want to be that way for me, because I just feel peaceful when I'm not trying so hard, But I think it's so key to remember that's also how you're going to connect with other people.
Absolutely. When I was trying to pretend like I was someone different, like you said, I didn't show up well for myself, and I felt uncomfortable and out of alignment, but I didn't connect with people in the way that I'm able to now. Just like a quick example. So I just threw a bridal shower for my niece, who I just adore. And I am not a person that does decorations. I don't do them. I'm not interested in them. Like, I might get a bundle of flowers, but I'm awesome at food. So I'm like, I will do this bridal shower for you, and it will have great food, and I will gather people, and it will be awesome. But my daughter-in-law is amazing at decorations, and she's like, sign me up. Like, I will do that. And it was the most beautiful display of her talent. And by me not trying to be someone I wasn't, I allowed her to bring herself to the table and do what she's so great at. And I think that's something that we need to remember, is that by being ourselves and allowing other people to be their selves, it really brings out the best in all of us.
So good. And it makes our job as women easier.
So much easier.
Like, isn't that what we want?
Easier. Yes.
You get connected with others. You feel peaceful yourself. And then you're not running around like a crazy lady.
Yes.
Like holding this badge of honor of perfection around you. Like, no, but I can do that. Nope, I can do that too. And that's exhausting. That leads to the burnout, and like the women who then like go through these major pits of like, I can't do anything else.
Yes.
You don't have to go there.
Yeah. We can choose not to go to that place and just be a little bit more moderate and embracing who we are and who other people are too.
What else surprised you about young motherhood?
Well, there's a lot of things that surprised me about young motherhood. I think the first was how many things I was bad at. I was like really not good at a lot of things that I thought would be natural, and how much more fun I had when I embraced the things that I was really good at and the things I loved. I think for a long time, I thought motherhood should look a certain way. And when I realized that I had the power to find joy in motherhood, that really changed me. And I found that by doing the things that I love to do more often and focusing on those every day. So one of the things that I try to tell people who are in kind of some of those trenches is figure out what makes you feel successful as a mom, no matter what stage you're in. And then figure out what makes you feel joyful in motherhood, and do one of those things every day. So at the end of the day, you're not looking back and thinking, I was just this, or I just did that, or this was just hard. But I read a book to my kids, and I loved doing that. That makes me feel like a really successful mom. Or I made a really good dinner for my family, and with older kids, sometimes that's the only time we really get to gather. And so all of a sudden, preparing food feels really important to me. And I don't do it every day, and we're not always together. But on those days that it happens, it makes me feel really joyful and successful. And so doing more of those things. I do not prescribe to the idea of being a martyr. I refuse to be a motherhood martyr. I have control over my life. I have control over the things I do. And if I don't want to do the dishes right now because I'd rather sit and chat, I'm going to sit and chat. Do those dishes still have to get done? Of course they do. I think one of the other things that I learned is that our kids are way more capable than we give them credit for. They are way more capable of contributing to the family and contributing to the home. And that can be difficult to teach and hold those boundaries and hold those expectations. But it is the most wonderful thing to watch your kids say, oh, I can do that. Yes, I contribute. This is who I am. This is what I do. And that we work together as a family to create the life that not just they want, but that we all want.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're a little obsessed with giving our kids magical childhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that ends up being a really entitled childhood with kids who still struggle with feeling happy and confident because it's not in here. It's just something their mom created. It's a little bit fantastical and unsustainable. But when we can create magical moments of connection, of competence, of true like inner confidence in them, those are the magical moments that last.
So beautiful. And I hope everyone pauses and rewinds and re-listens and takes notes down on this part if they're a young mom, because those are like, if you can do those things, I think you're really going to love motherhood.
Yeah.
You really will. I remember there was one time, same, like I realized early that there were some things I really loved and lit me up, and there were some things I didn't. And one afternoon, I had 3 kids in 2 years. It was an adventure.
Yep.
And we got Play-Doh out, this like little clay. And it's when Frozen was huge. And my daughter was wearing an Anna costume most of the time. And she wanted me to shape the clay into a little Olaf. And I love anything artistic, anything creative. And so we probably spent 3 hours creating things out of this clay.
Awesome.
And the Olaf, like I nailed it. I actually really nailed it. But I remember thinking like, oh, this is kind of a waste of my time. I should clean. I should do other things. Now, for other women, they would have said, oh, does that mean I have to be creative and create Olaf?
Right.
No, for other women, there's other things that they could lean into and be in the total flow state for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Do that thing.
Yeah. Don't
look left and right and say, well, because that woman finds joy. No, it doesn't really matter. Find the thing. And I think kids kind of like anything that you're excited about.
Absolutely.
They just want to be exposed to it, and they want to see you. They want to be around a happy mom.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're excited about it and you're all in, whether it's reading them books or doing something creative or being super active or being the mom who's really good at all the play dates, it doesn't really matter what the thing is.
Right. Right. I agree so much. And them seeing your joy and your interest and your curiosity is just such a blessing to them. I've realized that so much more of who our kids become is about what they've seen. And so being someone that your kids maybe want to be like, not exactly like, heaven forbid anyone becomes exactly like me, but where they pull those things out and they watched me find happiness, find joy, be interested, be creative, connect, figure out in their own way how they can do that too.
And we're looking for like character traits and patterns. My mom was a learner, or she was curious, or she was interesting, or she got up after she failed, not the thing she was interested in or what that failure was or what she kept getting back up for. I love that. Those are the things we can model as mothers without having that exhausting pressure of doing all the things.
Yeah.
So moving on to then the teen years. I really, every once in a while, this is not a platitude to you. Every once in a while, my oldest now is just entering into the teen years, which has been really fun and just like you, really surprising at some of this stuff. But every once in a while, I'll go back to your Instagram because you don't post things that are just like a quick hit. They are thoughts that like you've been probably thinking about for a while, and that there's a lot of meat to. Like you could probably write a chapter of a book on any one of your posts. I hope you do someday, actually. Please do that. But I'll go back and I'll just like revisit because they're so good and they're so meaty. What advice would you give? Obviously, I want everybody to go to your Instagram and do the same thing. But what advice would you give? What have you learned about teens? What would you say to a new teen mom or someone that's in the thick of it?
So there are so many things. And like you said, I've written about a lot of them. And I could probably talk about parenting teens for the next 3 hours. But there's been something recently that I've been able to connect the dots on that I feel like feels very important to being a parent of a teen. And that has been, I've been thinking a lot about the concept of justice and mercy. Because one of the hardest things as a parent of a teen is they absolutely positively need expectations and rules and boundaries. As they're growing up, they have to have something to push against. if they have nothing to push against, they will find something to push against. It will be way bigger than your boundaries. And so that was hard for me because I had this very strong desire to be connected to my teen and be loved and have relationships. And sometimes I think, especially maybe just inside ourselves, or maybe what we hear from the world, is that you can't be both. You can't have expectations and have a loving relationship. But as I've been thinking a lot about justice and mercy, because those are concepts that we have to really use as we parent, not only teens, but little kids, but especially with teens, I've realized that for a long time, I thought, well, here's the situation where I give mercy, and here's the situation where I give justice. We have to have some of those like in a little bit of an equal balance. The more I thought about it, the more I've realized that every situation with our teenagers needs both. They need the justice and they need the mercy, but they need them together in the same instance. And one of the things that I thought was, if you talk about an expectation, then there's no mercy. Or if you let something go, then there's no justice. And what I realized is, as we're parenting our kids, if we can say, in this situation, here's the justice, I've set this expectation, and you let's just do something super easy like curfew, okay? Mm-hmm. You come home at midnight and they come home at 12:15. Well, there's a lot of me that, because I'm actually not much of like a super hard rules person, that's like, oh my gosh, it's fine. I was up anyway. And that isn't always useful, because then they have nothing to push against. Well, then I have no curfew. I don't even choose to come home on time because it doesn't even matter. My mom doesn't have rules. But I can also say, oh shoot, like you came home at 12:15, kiddo. And so tomorrow night your curfew's at 11. And what I thought was, if you did that, then it was like unkind and you were breaking connection. And what I've realized is, you can have that boundary and you can have that rule and you can enforce that rule, and you can say, and how was your night? Did you have so much fun? Tell me all about what you guys did tonight. It must have been super fun for you to want to come home 15 minutes later. And it doesn't mean that there's not the rule or the expectation. It doesn't mean there's not the consequence. It just means that we don't have to break connection in order to have those boundaries. And that's something I wish I would have understood so long ago. I don't have to be mean and harsh and unkind to enforce a rule or a boundary. And I don't have to be lighthearted and not caring to be connected. I can do both. And I think it's really helpful for our kids when we do. So my 12-year-old loves to have friends over. He just loves it. He is an entertainer. He is a gatherer, and it's wonderful. Sometimes it means that there is a mess, and he knows that like if he wants to have friends over, he has to clean up. So sometimes it doesn't get cleaned up, and I can enforce that boundary, and I can say, hey, when you have friends over, you have to clean up. And I can do that. And I can say, you have to go get that basement cleaned up. And I can also show a lot of love and connection by saying, and I'm going to run down and help you. I don't have anything going on right now. And I just wish that I understood that justice and mercy have to exist together in each situation. It's not one or the other. That doesn't serve us or our kids or who I want them to see or become. I don't want them to have to think that I either have to be hard and ruthless or I have to be a doormat and kind. Like those can really come together. And that's something that I'm really working on in my own parenting right now.
Oh, that's powerful. Sometimes I think when we're becoming parents, because no one was born a parent.
Right.
And so all of us are on this journey and learning. We feel like until we really know how to do it, we do fake it till we make it, because you're in the situation. You can't, that's your only option in parenthood sometimes. And sometimes I'll put on a persona when I'm not sure yet what to do. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, I've never done the teen thing, so now I'm going to put on the justice persona.
Right.
But realizing all of them exist and coexist together, I've never thought of that. And my daughter's going to be really happy we had this conversation. But I do remember having a similar aha moment with little kids when I was putting on the justice parent persona and like, you can't hit. And now I need to be mad for a little bit.
Right. Like I want you to pay for this.
Yeah.
And when we do boundaries and justice well, they are paying for it through their actions and consequences.
Yeah.
We don't have to add to that.
Mean mom.
No, if your expectations are you must turn in all of your assignments, and they don't, there is a justice consequence for that. You don't have to be mean, but you can say like, oh, it looks like you don't have enough time to get all your stuff done. So we're going to scale back on technology for the next little bit until you can get back on top of your homework. And can I help you? Do you think you need a tutor in math? It seems like this is something that's getting a little bit out of control. How can I help? And that is how we keep connection during those teen years and keep boundaries.
So beautiful. And the pattern I would try to sum up as being the boundary is the boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And you aren't the bad guy. The boundary is the boundary.
Yes.
But then what are other ways you can show love and support and train them? Because part of it is like they're learning how to deal with boundaries too.
Absolutely.
So it's like, now how do I train you? It was hard for me. It's still hard for me on some new boundaries that I have in my own life.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
And I love when my own mom, which she doesn't because, but if she ever pops in like, can I pick up your kids for you? Yeah. Or like, let me just help you because the pressure's heavy in this new boundary in your life. But taking the boundary away, then I can never become that thing.
Yeah.
Looks like I'm not capable.
It's so true. And I think too, like going along with that, sometimes when we take away all the consequences for our kids or take away the expectations, we're sending a message that you're not capable. You're actually not capable of dealing with something hard. You're not capable of dealing with the consequence of your actions. You're not capable of me having an expectation of you because you're not smart enough. You're not strong enough. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to raise kids who think like that the person who believes in them the least is their parent.
Yep. I have so many stories growing up with coaches that expected the most. And my husband has a baseball coach in high school that was tough, really tough. And if you ever want to see my husband cry, go ask him a question. Go ask him about that coach.
Yeah.
The expectations were so high. And that communicated that love, ironically. Like he wouldn't have an expectation unless he knew you could do it.
Yeah.
So inherent in an expectation is, I believe in you.
Right.
I know you can do it. Or I wouldn't set that law.
Yes. And I want something better for you than you even see for yourself. And, I had to kind of set one of those yesterday. And I will say it's still uncomfortable for me. I am by nature a nice, happy, easygoing person. That's my personality. I don't love doing the hard stuff. Just a plug for people who are parenting with two parents. It's not fair to make one parent do it all. It's not fair for one parent to be the bad guy all the time and for the other to be the good guy. That's not a fair way to raise your children. It's not a fair way for the person who always has to set the boundary to only be the boundary person and the other person to get to be the fun and loving person. It works very best when we both take on the responsibility of both of those things because it allows the other parent to be able to love and enjoy also and the parent who often is the love and enjoyment to also feel the weight and the pressure of holding boundaries too.
Love that plug. So important. If you don't hold that, you're going to work on your marriage next, and then you're going to go back and work on parenthood again.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Anything else you would say to parenting teens or to the teen parents themselves?
Yeah, I just think this is a little bit of a lonely time, and finding someone that you can confide in and go to for support is really important. For some, that's somebody that they pay. For others, it's like a sister or a mom. I really advocate finding somebody that's 10 years your senior in parenthood. They can give you some perspective. They can let you know that it's not the end of the world because your kid did this. They're not going to end up here. I think it's a really big fallacy that moms love to buy into. Like, oh, they stole gum at the store, and which means that they will be a criminal for life, and it's really good to talk to somebody who's 10 years down the road who can tell you the things that don't really matter and then the things that do. So I would just say trying to do it alone, that's not usually very useful. But also being careful with who you let in to the things that feel important and sacred in your life too.
I think that's good advice for young parents too.
Yeah.
Like you need the perspective when you have a 2-year-old too.
Yeah.
My first child versus my now 5-year-old.
Yeah.
I just know like he's fine.
I know.
He's great.
Yeah.
He might stay up an hour past his bedtime, maybe 4.
Yeah.
He survived.
Yep.
Turns out they can do it.
We can do it.
And
Totally.
Same thing, like little kids, little problems, but I needed someone older, my mom or an aunt or just that friend. I had one in my congregation out in Connecticut, and it was so beautiful. The things she would say that I was just like, oh, you're right. But to me, in my own home, when I get lost in like the stress of it all, it feels all consuming. Like this means something for that little child. And so fresh perspective, so helpful. Okay, we're going to do a lightning round for a second.
Ready.
What's your favorite thing to do on the weekend? I
love to watch my kids play sports.
Oh, good thing you had lots of boys, and lots of boys had you as the mom. Product you can't live without.
I have a blow dryer that dries my hair in like 6 minutes, and it's the best investment I've ever made.
More about the time than it did something to your hair. Mm-hmm. Last book that you loved recently.
I read A Girl Called Samson by Amy Harmon, and I loved it. She's one of my favorite authors.
Fun. Good recommendation. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Teleportation, because my husband loves to travel and I don't love it. But if I could just teleport and stay a couple of days, I'd be way more excited about it.
Avoid the jet lag.
Yeah.
We would buy into that superpower. Yeah. If you could have lunch with anyone, who would it be?
This is probably kind of cliche, but I would have lunch with Jesus.
Can you invite me?
Yes.
Take me. If you picked a different career, what would it be?
I would love to be a college professor.
Oh, yeah. You might get calls after this podcast.
Yeah. I'm not sure what I would teach, but I would love to be one.
And you love to teach.
I love to teach. I just, I need to be more of an expert in something. I guess that's why you go to school for like 10 years for it.
You could teach a lot of things. Okay. So we're going to run with that. Okay. Being a college professor, and we're going to give you an open mic now, but I am going to pick your topic. I'm hiring you.
Okay, perfect.
I want to talk more about womanhood and how you've navigated, obviously, parenthood and being a wife. I would love to hear from you how you've navigated that. What are some things that have been, whether it's habits or teachings or practices that you felt have helped you along the way?
Well, one of my favorite questions that you texted me earlier was like, how are you with habits? And like, what do you do that keeps you centered? And I'm horrible with habits. So I am a creative brain through and through. And every time I try to start something, it seems like I get derailed by something that feels more in the moment. Like my husband always teases me, I can only calendar for like 1 week, because after that, it just feels like a little bit stifling. So the idea of like something all the time feels like a lot for me. But I think one of the things that has been so helpful for me as with the way I do things is to realize that good habits don't have to be prescribed or done exactly right or the same. I really, really wanted to be someone who did that. In my mind, there's this like ideal type of person who's successful and together and with it. And they do all these things, and I read books about it, and I try to implement it for like a day or 3. And I realized that it's just not me. But I think one of the most beautiful things for me is realizing that I can do it in my own way. Like I love scripture study, and my goal is that I do it before anything else happens during the day. But like a lot of times my day just comes, and one of the best parts of me is that I live in the moment, and I don't want to lose that about myself. And so if my son comes in and he like wants to hang out for a minute, like then I do push scripture study. And one of the best things I've realized for someone like me is that I can read my scriptures that night. And is it ideal for me to get them done in the morning? For sure. Or sometimes I end up listening to a podcast during the day, and I used to feel very like prescriptive, like that doesn't count. Mm-hmm. Or I didn't do it first, so it doesn't count. And I've realized that there's like a lot of ways to be successful, and there's a lot of ways to have really great habits, and just putting them in my life somewhere is better than not doing them at all. Another thing that I have loved is I have a hard time focusing when I pray. I believe in prayer, and I think it's so important and so critical. And I've had so many amazing revelatory experiences when I'm praying and feel the closeness of God in my life. But it's been even better for me because I write. I've started writing down my prayers. And at first I'm like, oh, you can't do that because you're not closing your eyes and your arms aren't folded and, all these things. But I've never communicated with God better than when I write down what I want to tell him. And it's just been a really beautiful experience. And I kind of stopped doing it for a while and felt really distant from God. And when I brought it back, I was like, oh, he's here. And I'm telling him, and I'm telling him about the good stuff and the bad stuff and the hard stuff. And because I write, that's how I communicate best. And so really like just kind of diving into those things. I love movement and I love connection. And so taking walks with a friend is my favorite form of exercise. And really like, I really love that. A little while ago, I was feeling really disconnected, and because my life had been busy and I was busy doing good and important things for me. And I was praying and asking like, boy, I'm just feeling disconnected. And basically God said like, there are all kinds of opportunities for you to connect. Like, just do it. Just do it. And so I signed up to help someone. I stopped at my neighbor's house and chatted and went and supported a family member doing something. And I was like, oh, it's really interesting that we think like, poor me, I don't have connection when there's a million opportunities to connect. And so just really, taking a little bit more ownership of the life that I want and diving into it.
That's something I wrote down that I love about you, that you're not afraid to say that something didn't work.
Yeah, I'm not.
Which actually is super powerful. Like, that wasn't what I expected, or that was way hard, or that just isn't working.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the magic key to an answer is like, what is the question?
Yeah.
Where's the friction? If I can't identify the friction point, I can never solve it.
Yeah.
But if I can say, okay, and then also know what your goal is.
Yes.
Like, I love that with habits. Like, this reminds me actually of when I was about to have my first baby and someone gave me the best advice. They said, write down what your goal is and then some different ways you could get there.
Yeah.
And it was like, my goal is to have a healthy baby and to be in good health myself. Now, here's the way I would like to get there. If that doesn't work, here's another way that's okay with me. And if that doesn't work, here's another way that's okay with me.
Love that.
But my goal isn't this form of childbirth.
Right.
It's that I hope my baby's safe and I hope I'm too.
Yeah.
And thinking of that. So what is your goal? Your goal is to feel connection with God, to feel connection with other people. There's lots of prescriptions that could work.
Yeah.
And for some people who need to have schedule, they may say, if I don't do it at the first, I'm not flexible enough to add it later in the day.
Totally.
But if you're flexible enough, then why do you need the prescription?
Right.
You're okay.
Right. Well, and I'm okay to say, I feel like it's better when I can do it in the morning. But just because I didn't doesn't mean I don't have a chance.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I've really learned in my life is there are, like you said, there are a million ways to get from point A to point B. And I'm going to be honest, there are some ways that are better than others. There are some ways that are easier than others.
Mm-hmm.
There are some ways that are more foolproof than others. But there are still a million ways to get there. And I think about that a lot with parenting. One of the questions that you asked me was, do you have any regrets? And I might get emotional about this. And I have a lot. Like, I have so many. There's so many things I know now that I wish I knew then. And I could have been such a better parent. And I could have helped kids in a way that was so much better for them had I known what I know now. And I think for me, the best part of understanding who you really are to God and understanding his plan for all of his children is that he makes up for all those things that I didn't know. And somehow he makes right what I did wrong. So I don't have to live in that regret. I don't have to live thinking, oh, I wish I would have. I get to live now and I get to do better now and I get to love better now. And I just think for anyone who says oh, I don't have any regrets because whatever happened was how it's supposed to happen, I think there's maybe a little bit of truth to that. But I think it's okay for us to self-reflect and say, you know what? I could have done better, or I wish I would have done better, or I wish I would have known. But I know better now, and that's who I'm going to be today. And maybe one of the reasons I'm so passionate about teaching people about what I wish I knew was because in my heart, if somebody doesn't have to have the pain or the loneliness or the inadequacy that I felt, like what a gift,
Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that and speaking to what I think all of us in our truest moments really feel like, I wish I would have done better for that first.
Yeah.
I do. And the second, all of them actually.
Yeah.
All 5. I wish I would have.
And every day.
And
like
my
every
husband
day.
and every single person I interact with, all too often I could say the same thing. And that, I think, is really what grace is. It's His grace.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just saying I'm like just throwing something at it and saying, oh, it's fine. Like, give it grace. It's like He has grace for every single thing I do wrong. And if that doesn't move me to humility and a desire to be a better human, just out of the fact that like someone loves me enough to be okay with that.
Right.
Knowing that.
Right.
All right. I want to do the best I can. I want to try. And I think what you said, that I think there is a temptation to look back and say, I don't regret anything because that's how it was supposed to happen. I don't think that does a service to those we hurt.
Yeah.
Because we did make choices.
Yeah.
And some of them were hurtful.
Yeah.
And maybe in our lives, we can see how God turned that for the better. But is that fair to those that you hurt?
Right.
But I do think it's helpful to say, like, I believe in a God that makes beauty from ashes.
Yeah.
I regret the ashes and I regret the pain it caused you. For sure that it caused me, but I can already see the good things that have come from that.
Right.
But for the pain that it caused you, I am so sorry. If I could take it back, I would do anything to take it back. I think that's real healing and forgiveness, and asking someone else to then accept the same grace from God because you've offered that and realized that like that one was on me.
Yeah.
God didn't mean that to happen.
Super, super powerful idea. And extending grace into all of our relationships, seeing the example of a God and a Savior that can do that allows me to emulate that better and be so grateful when others are willing to do that for me. Like, I sometimes can be a little forgetful. I definitely put too many things on my calendar. And my senior in high school, we do like a lunch group where once a week the moms will feed this group of boys. And I have forgotten in the past and ended up being like, I will Venmo you for you to take your friends to Wendy's, instead of have lunch. And so the other morning, my son was just so sweet and so kind and just said, hey, I saw that we have lunch group at our house today. I just wanted to make sure that you remembered. And so much grace in that for a mom who sometimes is a little more scattered than she wants to be, or who maybe like disappoints someone every once in a while when they think they're coming over for something home cooked. And so sweet for him to not be like, oh my gosh, well, my mom always forgets. Did you remember? It was just so sweet and so kind. And as my teenager did that for me, understanding where my weaknesses are and understanding when I might need a little bit of help and a little extra grace and maybe those reminders, me turning that around and saying like, do I do that for him? Do I just get so frustrated about the things that drive me crazy about him? Or do I say, this is part of who he is. This might be a weakness. Let me see how I can help make up the difference for him.
Well, he really just gave you back exactly what you taught us. He gave you like a little bit of a boundary and like a reminder with all the love and mercy in the world. So it's working. It's working. That's so such true. A beautiful pattern of how we can treat everyone though.
Yes.
And even you saying like, I'm not a motherhood martyr. I don't do that. But then setting the boundaries and being able to say, this is what I'm hoping for. I know sometimes that's hard, instead of saying you never, or this is a point of contention. I'm going to bring it up in a way that I'm already bubbling over.
Yeah.
To say, this has been hard for us in the past. Like, and I think, I'm thinking marriage at this point,
Yeah.
How can I approach my husband in that way? Because now we've lived together for 15 years. We're like actually in the teenage years of our marriage.
So true. That's so true.
That's so funny.
True. I love it. Yeah. And it works for all relationships. It works, like I'm thinking friendships, right? It's so easy for us to be like, oh, that person doesn't do things like I do, or she's a little bit annoying when I work with her or whatever. And it's like, what if instead we said, you know what? She's not always great at remembering that we have a meeting. So instead of being bugged that she doesn't show up, I'm going to text her 20 minutes before and like, hey, I just want to make sure that you remembered that we had a meeting. Or somebody's not always, I'm not great at like remembering birthdays. And so I'm so appreciative when someone on a group text is like, happy birthday, Lizzy. And I'm like, yes, because I actually do really, really care about you. But remembering birthdays, not my thing. And so nice to do that on a group text and remind me that somebody I love is having a birthday,
Yes.
So looking for ways in our everyday life where we can not only give grace to a weakness, but help lift somebody out of it too.
Mm. And I love that, also going along with what you said about leaning into what we're good at.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if we already realize we're in a social group or in a church congregational group or in a family group, and someone has something on their plate that we know is going to be hard for them, can we alleviate that by redistributing who has that job? Or maybe we actually are good at that one thing. I have a couple things that I can take off. Like maybe I just offer preemptively and don't wait for it already to be so hard for them.
Right.
Like see those moments too and say, I don't know if this is a great fit. Maybe for your own kids and your family and the jobs that you have. Like everything equal doesn't mean everyone does the same thing or is good at the same thing. It's when motherhood gets easy, when we can make it easy for our kids and our social circles too in that way.
Yeah, I really love that idea.
I would love to turn back just for a minute as we end the podcast on your advice for women in motherhood. I mentioned how much I love the fact that you're okay noticing when things aren't okay or don't feel right or aren't in the sweet spot, like they're not what you want. Where do you go from there for women?
Yeah, I think the best thing that we can do is start taking control of our own joy. So paying attention when you feel it, paying attention to what you love. One of the things that I realized really quickly was I find a lot more joy when I'm in community. And so the idea of doing everything on my own was miserable. Also realizing that creating that joy is going to take some work. I think right now a lot of us would prefer just ease, but ease doesn't usually bring joy. We think it does. We think that just having a day off or just having a minute or whatever is going to bring us a lot of joy. And sometimes it can, especially when your life is exceptionally full. But work equals, like joy is work and work is effort. And so the more we buy into the idea that it just comes to people, I think the less filled we're going to be.
Mm.
You have to work for fulfillment. You have to work for purpose. You have to work for joy. And the more you put into something, I believe it's an eternal principle. The more you put into something, the more you get out of it. And so, I remember when I had young kids and I was very lonely, I did all kinds of things that I did not want to do, nor did I feel comfortable doing them. I led an exercise group that I'm not qualified to lead. I had people over in my small, messy house. I invited every single person that was on a Facebook group to go to the park. Those are not things that were easy, but those were the things that ended up bringing me joy. And in each stage of life, I've done that. And sometimes you're met with resistance. Sometimes people don't come. Sometimes things fall, they're a flop. Certain traditions I had living where we don't live now really were great and brought them here. And it was just like being able to say, okay, like that's no longer for us or for this community. What else can I do now? I think sometimes when we're very into what's on the outside, it can get in the way of our joy. I think when we start understanding who we are on the inside and what we need there, it can be a lot more productive and a lot more useful.
Oh, such great tips. And starting with part of the reason I picked the name of the podcast, Lean In, is like be sensitive to what you're feeling. Mm-hmm. Even if it doesn't make sense or if everybody else is saying, no, you should really be focused over here at this point in your life. Like, I think we have so many of those answers of what we love and who we are and what would fulfill us and the contribution we have to make around us. If we're quiet enough, maybe if we write or we take moments in prayer or in whatever you need to get silent and cut other things out that are so noisy, you can be clear on where the friction is, where the issues are. And then I love your next suggestion, and then go prototype.
Yeah.
Go try stuff. Yes. Not with this huge, overwhelming, and if it doesn't work, it's so embarrassing, with just no stress.
Yeah.
I'm going to go, what are 5 things I can try? I know where the friction is. Mm-hmm. Now, what are 5 things I can try? And then if one of them works, great. And if none of them work, great. 5 things that don't work for how you are and what you like. Yeah. And go try some more. And that's not a failure. That's actually good.
Yes.
That's good.
I love that. I remember being really frustrated at one point because I felt like I was always doing the planning and always doing the inviting. And, I'd had 20 people over for dinner and no one ever invited us over. And I was kind of in this woe is me moment and talking about it with a friend. And I love friends who love you and don't let you stay in a bad spot. And she was like, Brooke, like, that's what you were made for. Like, are you doing this so people invite you, or are you doing this because you love it? If you're doing this because you love it, keep doing it. If you're doing it because you want an invitation back, stop and find something else to do. And it really like made me think. And she said, not everybody wants to have people for dinner, but you have people that will take your kids and let them play. And you have people that show up on your door when it's your birthday. And everybody's going to love you different. So maybe just be okay with the contribution you're making and stop keeping score. And if you don't love what you're doing, find something different to do that you love. And it was a really pivotal moment for me to realize that this wasn't about what everybody else was doing. It was about how do I find joy and happiness in my own life. And like you said, if it's not working, pivot and do something new.
Yep. And don't do things so that people will do things in return. Don't do things, whether it's as a mom or a friend or a wife, to then control the situation and make someone do it back. Like, that just won't ever work.
I know.
Spoiler alert, it never works. Dang it.
Yeah. So true.
So good. I would love to end by hearing what you hope your legacy is as a woman.
That was such a big question. And I'm just going to boil it down to two things. I hope people feel seen and loved when they're with me. That's pretty much all I've ever wanted. I can write 1,000,000 books and do 1,000,000 posts, but really like what matters most to me is at the end of the day that if you were with me, whether it was online or in person, that you felt seen and loved.
You are doing that in such a beautiful way. And I feel that around you. And I know so many do. And that's why we are drawn to you. So thank you for sharing that and your heart today. And thanks for spending time with us.
It was awesome. Thanks for starting a podcast that's so needed.
I'm so glad you found Lean In with Lizzy on this first episode. If you found it helpful, please share with someone you know who needs it too. Also, if you want to help this podcast grow, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and like, comment, and review this podcast wherever you listen in. Until next time, go have the courage to lean into your own life and leave your unique contribution to the world.